There is a lot of data that does go untouched and unharvested, so to speak. If it's a lead generation event, make sure you're getting those leads and all of that necessary information over to your CRM
Yeah.
immediately. Like that should be of the utmost priority. What exactly are we doing with the data? Are we learning from it, growing from it, and doing things with it?
I'm Camille Arnold, and this is Checked In. As the kids say, no cap, events are the best way to get first-party data. From registration forms to attendee engagement, events offer a direct line to valuable insights. But the real challenge? Knowing how to actually turn that data into action. In this episode, we're breaking it all down. Listen in as we explore how to capture the right event data and align it with your greater marketing strategy so you can prove the real impact of your event programs. Let's get checked in.
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Kaplan, part of the experiential team here at Splash, and I am so excited and thrilled to welcome you to today's conversation. As Dolly Parton once said, it is really hard to be a diamond in a rhinestone world. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why am I referencing this quote from Dolly Parton? And I just have to tell you, I do think that she was obviously referring to event data in this quote, or at least for the sake of my analogy, we're going to go with the story that she's totally talking about event data. And it's because this quote is basically saying that there is so much data that you can gather from an event that sometimes it can be really, really hard to mine that data to find those gemstones that are really special and going to help make a major impact in your marketing efforts. But fear not, folks, because today we're going to be revealing how you can transform your event insights into measurable marketing results. Because in a world where, third-party cookies are disappearing and privacy regulations are really tightening, your events have become marketing gold mines. Well, they always have been marketing gold mines, but they're really becoming the forefront of it. So Dolly was totally talking about event data, gold mines. You get my connection? Because events do offer that first-party data capture that is freely given by most of your most engaged prospects and customers. But even though events are gold mines for this data and information, only 20% of marketers are actually using that data effectively. So today, we're going to flip the script, we're going to change that statistic, and we're going to show you how to build a framework for identifying which event data points actually matter, practical methods to capture meaningful data without compromising attendee experience, specific techniques to transform that raw event data into campaigns, integration strategies to make sure your data flows through the tech stack, and approaches to help you prove ROI from your event programs with data. And it's not just going to be me up here alone spewing all of this information your way. In a couple of moments, I'm going to be joined by the incredible Taylor Bohn, who is Cvent's event technology manager. And selfishly, something I've loved since Splash has been acquired by Cvent is access to brains of some really phenomenal and incredible marketers. And Taylor has over a decade of experience managing and maximizing Cvent's event technology usage and strategy. She has single-handedly developed and pioneered Cvent's event technology team, overseeing the development and implementation of tech solutions that enhance every aspect of the event's lifecycle. So from virtual platforms to on-site engagement tools. So to say that we are lucky that she has lent time today to come and speak with us is an understatement. I am so excited and can't wait to hear all that she has to say. Without further ado, it is time for me to bring up Taylor on stage. So let's get Taylor up here. Taylor, hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
So good. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get into the conversation. I feel like a really great place for us to start talking is chatting through why event data matters. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, the marketing landscape has shifted drastically and radically over the last few years. There's a lot more privacy regulation and phasing out of those cookies. And we don't have to explain how important data is to know that it's like key in your marketing efforts. But that means that events are truly one of the only places and channels that you can gather that critical first-party data and information that, attendees willingly give over. So I'd love to start by hearing your perspective on this shift and how has your thinking about event data changed recently, and kind of what do you feel like is the biggest misconception about event data that you see a lot of organizations making?
Definitely. And so much has changed. So much has become more critical and stringent when it comes to the rules of the game, so to speak. I think what's become most important has been actionable insights. We use that buzz phrase at Cvent a lot, but what does it actually mean? It's collecting data, but actually doing something with it. We have technology at our fingertips. We need to just be churning data through and just collecting all these fields and having reports and all of this. I think that's all great, but what exactly are we doing with the data? Are we learning from it, growing from it, and doing things with it? A lot of times I have to go back to my teams and say, hey, what are we planning to do with this field once we collect it? And then actually delivering that data in a consumable way, not just data for data's sake. It actually has a story behind it. Whether that's something that we can improve, change, maybe we need to hone down on our programming, maybe we need to shorten, lengthen, whatever the case is. It's just that you're doing something with it. I think during COVID times, I think data became a really big focus and there was just a lot out there. And
Yeah.
now we're kind of coming back to the happy medium. Let's actually do something with this, bring it back into a more manageable scope, I would say.
Oh, I 100% agree. Like more is not always more. Like it's being really intentional and using the data
Exactly.
to act on. I love actionable insights because that is just so key when you're looking at event data and what people like. Just because you get more doesn't mean that it's the best data out there. So that's totally such a big one. And also, it's not just like for marketing, the actionable insights, like they're for your other teams, like for sales, for CX, for product. Like those are the data that you want to collect to continue on forward. I would love to know what kind of event data do you believe is actually valuable in 2025? And I know that was like a very loaded question, and we'll unpack a lot more as we go out throughout today's conversation, but kind of like high level, what do you think is the most valuable event data to collect today?
I love this. And I do think it's going to depend on your specific organization. I think it's going to depend on the goals of your event. I know we'll talk about goals a lot, but I would say that the big ones for me are going to be actually listening to your audience and your attendees. So whether that's grabbing feedback survey data, how did they feel about the event? Did they get a lot out of it? Will they take action off of it? Will they attend your future events? That sort of thing. So feedback survey data. And then the other piece is going to be attendee engagement data. So we have our polls, we have Q&A, we have reactions that you can submit to certain content. I think not just putting content out there for attendees and just always assuming that you're the best thought. Get that feedback back from your attendees so that you can iterate off of. I mean, your events are only as good as your attendees are. You want those repeat attendees, you want those recommendations and referrals to other people to attend your events and webinars. Grabbing that upwards feedback back and then actually listening to it, I think is the key. Although that is hard to do.
Yeah, sometimes it's tough to kind of take it, but it makes such a difference when you do incorporate attendee feedback and just thoughts and feelings because you're ultimately just trying to get them to your attendees to like buy in on what you're talking about and be engaged. And without that feedback,
Exactly.
you can't really do that. And I kind of would love to like double down a bit on that question. Are there can't miss questions you think you should be asking in a feedback survey? Are they more like, do you find more value in open-ended questions or like ones in a scale? Like when you're searching for that feedback, since it is such valuable data, what do you find is maybe like can't miss way to phrase questions or engage your audience?
That is such a good question. We actually did a pretty hefty exercise to standardize our feedback surveys at Cvent a couple years back because we had so many stakeholders that were asking maybe even the same question, but in a different way
Okay.
and in different formats, to your point, like open-ended comments versus a star rating versus 1 to 10. And you're like, you can't really do anything with that from a scalability perspective. You need to be able to report on some of those metrics really easily. So overall satisfaction, that's just the baseline. You need to just have a clear and make that easy for attendees. I always compare when you go to the airport and they have the little smiley face buttons that people can just click really quick as they're walking through.
Mhm.
That alone though doesn't tell the whole story because if you're like negative or sad face, why
Right.
was it a sad face?
With no
Why?
context.
What can we do to improve that? Exactly. So I would say you definitely need some sort of open-ended comments. You need people to be able to put in like their sentiments and the background, the context. But then flip side is you need to be able to ensure that you're able to receive that open-ended comments and do something with it. One thing our team has been leveraging very heavily is AI. Let AI take all of those paragraphs of feedback and compile it into a couple bullet points of maybe a lot of people had the same sentiments. Maybe your webinars are too long, or maybe your conference needs some more networking opportunities, whatever the case is. Not that those are real examples that we literally have gotten in our events program, but those are things that you could take tangibly out of those open-ended comments. Outside of that, we do get a lot of other asks from other teams. Like you said, other teams are going to want to harness this really important category of campaign events. So maybe you're going to ask for product interest. Maybe you're going to ask for like next steps or other topics they're interested in, that sort of thing. So don't be shy about that. But I think it's a matter of making sure that like the most important things are required. Like you're giving people easy access to fill out that data quickly.
Dropping literally such knowledge. Like I just love hearing you talk, and you could not be more just like knowledgeable on the matter. And I am so glad that we got to pick your brain there and double down on that question, because I think that having the opportunity to provide extra context and also AI, using that to make your job easier with compiling that data in a
Absolutely.
digestible format is brilliant. Yeah, we love some like open-ended questions, and always kind of doing conditional formatting on our surveys. Like if you have extra time and would like to give us a bit more analysis, click here. And then like, because there are
Yes.
people who are going to be a bit more outspoken and want to provide feedback. And we find that's like super, super helpful. And something that we've recently done is on our feedback surveys, we've asked for people to submit a testimonial, and if we're okay to put that in marketing materials. And then anytime we're promoting
Yes.
an upcoming Magic Spark dinner or strategy sesh, whatever it was, we would use some of that quote to be like, hey, others attendees have said, and using that to kind of fuel more of our campaigns.
And don't be afraid of doing that. I think what we have found is like there's a happy medium of having too many questions for sure, but you can always leverage required versus optional questions. Like make your most important questions required. So do your overall satisfaction as required. Maybe you have some like logistics questions, and then the rest, leave it open. Like don't prevent people from submitting at least what they want to submit. I know there's a couple of questions asking about like response rate. It is definitely something that I think a lot of people struggle with. So make it as easy as possible to get people, at least get those responses. You can explore some creative ways to incentivize that. But yeah, don't be afraid to add in optional questions.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So we've kind of talked through why event data matters. And I kind of want to talk through like, we know data matters. Like there's always a struggle to make meaningful use of that data. So I want to kind of go into the strategy and the strategical approach to creating what you want to do with the data that you get. So I would really love to kind of pick your brain on how you typically help teams, because you said there's a lot of teams that come to you and want to leverage this data. And especially with like events as the campaign, how do you help teams align around what success looks like before an event, especially in terms of, you know, the data that you're going to collect from that event?
Yeah. And this is, I feel like, probably the biggest pain point. And I think it's the biggest area of growth for just events in general and event technology, more
Mhm.
specifically, making sure that you have a seat at the table when it comes to what events your company is doing or not doing. Like there's a lot of times that events get brought up and there's not a clear direction on what are the goals, what's the objective of this event, and everyone's kind of looking around and they're like, it's to do an event. What are you talking about? You're like, wait, maybe I shouldn't have asked. No, you have to ask that question, because if you don't have your goals nailed down, literally, what are you doing? What is the purpose of doing that event? How are
Yeah.
you going to measure the success of that program after when it all is said and done? Is it lead gen? Is it brand awareness? Is it customer appreciation? Whatever those objectives are, you have to nail those down. And the hard conversation of asking that, making stakeholders like pin them down on an answer on that. Once that's established, it really, the rest of it becomes easy, because then as you're going through the event life cycle, let's say you're debating adding an extra question into the reg form. Literally, you can always go back to that objective or that the goals of the program and say, you can ask yourselves, does this satisfy or help us achieve those goals? If the answer is no, great, we're not going to do it. So I think that is the most critical piece. if you don't have that established, you literally can't start planning the event. So as much as we want to get into the weeds on the tech and the data, I think it really starts at like the event goals at large, because that'll drive the rest of your decision-making process, including your data strategy. So you got to have that nailed down out the gate.
Oh, totally. I mean, it really does start with the why. Like, why are we doing this event? What does success
Exactly.
look like? Because without goals, like you're just busy. You're not being strategic. You're not doing anything that impacts the further pipeline and down funnel. And so you got to be really clear. And I love how you kind of mentioned like you really can like reverse engineer your event data collection based on what your goals are for the event. So like with lead
Absolutely.
gen, like you're obviously prioritizing like lead capture and intent signals and making sure your routing to sales is on par. But like with customer expansion, you're looking at what accounts are in the room. Like, are there new product interests? And you can ask questions that are relevant data to have for your specific
Absolutely.
mind. So I kind of would love for you to maybe talk through your process for deciding what data points to prioritize. Again, I know some of these are like kind of meaty questions, but do you have
We
a
love
framework
them.
you could share, or maybe like 2 or 3 questions every marketer kind of should be answering before just like when they're deciding their goals and then figuring out how to map their data capture back to the goal of the program?
Yeah, and this was a pretty heavy project that I actually report up to our event operations director, which is
Mhm.
very handy. We just work in tandem really well. The event tech function lends itself really well to operations kind of running the engine, so to speak. She developed a pretty robust framework exactly laying that out. And don't be afraid to get like literal. Write down as specific as possible what each event type is doing to get the conversation started. I mean, we mentioned a couple, the brand awareness, whether it's customer appreciation, lead gen, like whatever those are. There's a few that are kind of the basics. And I feel like most of them kind of fall into those generic categories. And then
Mhm.
from there, you're gonna write down like what are stakeholders' expectations out of your event and role play that with your stakeholders. If you're like, hey, we're gonna do this seminar. Great. What are you, sales stakeholder? Like, what are you guys hoping to get out of this program? Well, we want
Mhm.
leads, obviously. Great. Let's talk about that. How many leads do you want? Do you want net new business? Do you want to expand on existing customers? How many decision makers do you want in the room? Like, get literal with them, because I think a lot of times there's assumptions made from the stakeholder. They assume we are the experts, which we are, but we need to know what they want from us. We need like help us help you kind of thing. So yeah, don't be afraid to have those conversations, but ours is as specific as writing down on us. We use like a slide, but it's like brand awareness. Here are the goals. And some might vary. If it's a brand awareness event that's international, maybe they vary in that region. Maybe it's brand awareness for net new business. Like there's different exceptions to the rule, of course, but I think at a baseline, you need to have like kind of the minimum. Like, what are you getting out of it? But yeah, don't be afraid to ask those literal questions.
Yeah. How do you kind of look at measuring brand awareness?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think there's a lot of room for discussion and debate on
Yeah.
this, because it is pretty subjective when you think about it. But you're going to be looking at more of those soft skills. You're going to be looking at attendance and like no show rates. Did the people actually show up? Maybe you have duration tracking at your fingertips. Maybe you have attendee engagement. So are people actually, just like you submitted a question, like that would indicate that you are engaging with our content, and then therefore you're going to be aware of the brand. You also have to look at the content type. So we can also look at feedback survey data. You could also literally ask in the feedback survey, for example, how you feel about Cvent. Like, do you feel like you know more information? Do you want to learn more? That sort of thing. So you can ask people literally, but there's some assumptive data you could use. Engagement would be one. And then I would say the actual like attendance data would be a great one. You can also look at what do they do after the event. Integrations obviously becomes a really hot topic when it comes to this. Looking at the attendee like holistically on their journey, not just within your event. It's like maybe they went to a webinar and then in the next couple of weeks, they went to your website, downloaded some content. That is a great indicator that they became aware of your brand and started engaging with it. So it's kind of that whole attendee journey or buyer journey, I would say.
Oh, yeah. And that's why events fit so like nicely throughout the buyer's journey. Really well.
Absolutely.
The KPIs you just mentioned are such great ones for where you can look with brand awareness, and you can look and track and measure for any of those events, whatever you're kind of looking, wherever they fall in the buyer's journey and funnel. Obviously, every different event has different goals, and those goals are tied to your KPIs and metrics, and that's kind of where you map that data to. I want to kind of get into capturing with intention. How are we actually capturing this data where it feels really natural and valuable for attendees? Because as you mentioned, you're engaging with our brand. That is brand awareness, that is engagement. I'm capturing information that feels really natural. And every interaction and touch point during an event is an opportunity to learn something about your audience, and making it so important that those touch points and data is designed very thoughtfully. So I would love to kind of hear how you think about it as an overall part of the event experience, data itself.
Yes. And I think to your point, like it can be a lot. We don't want to inundate our attendees with a bunch of questions that feels overwhelming. We don't want to restrict them from registering, especially if it's something like a webinar. Like you don't need to be asking them 20 questions to register for a webinar. If it's a conference, different story. You have a little more leeway. You could include a little more in that reg process, for example. But I also feel like the data collection should be relevant to that moment in time. So if they're registering for the event, we probably don't want to be asking them for product interest at that time, because they haven't come to the event and learned about your products. That might be getting ahead. And of course, that's going to depend on your specific event program, but that's just one example. Same thing with, we wouldn't want to ask them for like, what topics are you interested for a webinar after they attended the webinar? You got to think about what's relevant in that moment. And you also want it to help you. So if you're trying to gauge people's interest in participating in a networking opportunity, great. Include that in the reg form and help kind of shape your agenda. We do that. We are not shy about that when we launch our Cvent Connect registration. We have a lot of stuff in there that helps flesh out our agenda, I should say. But yeah, definitely being mindful of not inundating people with things. You don't want to deter them from registering. You still want to have them participate in whatever it is, whether it's registration, feedback survey, whatever the case is. You want to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, event registration is not a tax form. You don't have to file for anything. You want it to be easy and simple and smooth. And I kind of loved that you said that you want to do it relevant questions at relevant time where they are in their journey, and not make them feel off put or anything. Everyone, when you like told us where you were tuning in, felt super natural, but not to be creepy. We're all marketers here. We get it. Now, if we were to host an in-person event, we kind of look back at this data and we're like, oh, Joe lives in New York. Let's make sure he's on our invite list. And we're able to, especially with everyone being remote, it's harder to know that. So that felt like a very natural way to be like, oh, okay, where are you tuning in? Don't not do that. That's great. It's great data for us to have. Now I'm just peeling back the curtain, exposing, but just where are those natural moments of interaction that you can get really smart information. But what would you say is like the sweet spot of collecting data and not overwhelming attendees? What would you say that sweet spot looks like?
Yeah. And I think there's no like clear answer on this. I hate to say that, but it's like, you have to know your audience. I referenced this earlier, like you could always add questions and make them optional. If you feel like, because there's always those people who are more willing to give information. I'm always like, track all the cookies. I don't care. But I know I'm probably an anomaly on that. Like I said, though, if it's a webinar, keep it short. We know that everything is digital now. So we're all competing for the space, and we all are competing for folks to attend our webinar and listen to what we have to say and whatever. So keep that short. We don't want to add another barrier to entry where there's already so many. And then I would say the other thing that becomes really helpful is ask people from your organization, maybe someone who's not even part of your department, have them go through a test registration and give that candid feedback. It's always great to have a fresh set of eyes to go through and be like, hey, do we have to ask that question? I know I get very stuck in I'm very technologically advanced. So I'm like, oh, that's easy. That makes sense. But make sure we're not just assuming that something is straightforward. Maybe you have a bunch of sub questions and that's just like so much. Maybe you could simplify. But yeah, just keeping a fresh set of eyes, don't be shy on that kind of stuff. Don't make assumptions there.
Oh, I love that so much. And I again, back to your point of it just being relevant for the moment. I think that if you're going to ask an attendee for more questions for data capture, make sure that you're also addressing it in why they're putting that information out there. So when you said for Connect, you use a lot of the data from your registrations and attendees to form the flows of different paths that people can take and sessions they can attend, and you use it to help build the agenda. And so if you're going to do something like that, make sure you're framing the question as to help us shape our conversation or to help us address a challenge you're facing. What is that so that the attendee
That is such a good point.
You're not asking, yes, you're asking for that information, but the value to them in providing that information is super clear. Because with that, then they're probably oh yeah, I want to come to this event to learn about this. So they're more willing to share if you frame it in a way that's this is the value you're going to get.
We're listening.
We're listening. Exactly.
Exactly. That's a great point.
Speaking of listening, I would love to know, what is a way that you can increase attendee engagement that boost that data capture? And are there any techniques that have worked really well? That doesn't really, I don't know why I said speaking of listening, because it's not, well, we're listening to the attendee engagement. So what are ways that you can boost that capture of attendee engagement? Have you found any techniques that work?
Yeah, I think what you said is a really great one. Tell them the context of why you're asking. Maybe it's to build out their attendee profile. Maybe it's, to help flesh out the rest of the content for the agenda. Maybe you literally are sourcing location, trying to find locations for a future event. Shameless plug, we literally asked back a few years ago, we asked Connect attendees after the event, what other cities would they be interested in attending Cvent Connect? Flash forward 2 years, we literally moved from Vegas to going to San Antonio this year. So we literally actioned off of that, and we kind of went back and forth on the team of, should we ask this? Should we be so upfront about it? And we're like, why not? Let's get people's insight. Give them context of why they're being asked the question, or if it's for privacy reasons or whatever the case is. That's completely fine. I think another way to do it is incentivize people. Do a $5 gift card for completing the feedback survey. We all know feedback survey responses in general are just really hard to get. I think the last time I checked, Grace asked about our feedback survey response rate. We get sub 5%. It's really tough to get people to come back in. So incentivize them, reward them for their time. The reality is time is valuable, and there's nothing wrong with being hey, here's a $5 Starbucks gift card for your thoughts. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe there's a raffle, but there's nothing wrong with literally incentivizing that. The other thing that you can do is, if your event tech platform allows it, which it should, if you're doing a virtual event, sprinkle poll questions throughout the event. That becomes feedback survey data in a sense, or that becomes data that you can use. Obviously, you can use it in the moment to shape the conversation, but you can use it in the future to help. Maybe it's adding future webinar content. Maybe it's adding some content or collateral on your website to address pain points in the market, whatever the case is, whatever it's trending. So you can sprinkle that out throughout the webinar or the session for sure.
Taylor, those were so fantastic and super practical. And I love those suggestions. I have no shame in offering little gift cards for people to complete them. And I am more incentivized as a person myself to complete it if I get a little something at the end. Now, I kind of want to move into the next part of the conversation, which is about, we've collected all of the data and we've got it from our polls, from the registration, from all of this. The real value of event data emerges when we use it to inform follow-up strategies or personalized communications or guide a lot of our broader marketing efforts. And we've talked about how we can use it to kind of shape agendas. But I kind of want to hear from your point of view. You've got all this data. Another big meaty question, what are you actually doing with it?
This is the actionable insights part. This is the action. So I think if you're at the early stages of kind of your data strategy, it might be a lot of reports and pulling data out and putting it onto slides and sharing with stakeholders. There's literally nothing wrong with that at all. As you get more advanced and mature, you're going to want to look into things like integrations. Have that data be automated and pushed over to your other systems so that you don't have to be pulling those reports. But as long as you're doing something with it, I think it's a win. And I think I'm not alone in saying this. There is a lot of data that does go untouched and unharvested, so to speak. But I think as long as you are getting, again, go back to those goals. Make sure that if it's a lead generation event, make sure you're getting those leads and all of that necessary information over to your CRM immediately. Like that should be of the utmost priority. If it's a customer appreciation event, make sure you're sending out follow-ups with whatever like thank yous and maybe there was some rewards that were given, that sort of thing. Make sure you're following up as timely as possible. But I would say integrations are going to be your North Star. That's going to be what you should be working towards. There's definitely like a crawl, walk, run to that, but making sure that you have the kind of key ones set up. So work with your stakeholders, work with your existing teams at the company and find out what systems you guys have. Find out like at the minimum, you're probably going to have a CMS. You're going to have a marketing automation tool. Like you're going to have kind of the basics there. So work with those. Of course, there are some more advanced tools, but start with the basics, I would say.
Yeah. And I really loved how you mentioned going back to the goals and like tying it into who is most pertinent to receive that information. Again, with your like lead gen events, it's going to be your sales team. And with your customer focused events, it's more those account managers and CSMs, and finding out from them exactly what data they're going to want to get from that event about their account, their customer, their prospect. That's relevant for the marketer to help curate something fun like a playlist or something for the event experience. But I mean, maybe the salesperson would probably be like, hey, saw you said Nickelback's Photographs, your favorite song. Let's talk about event tech. Like that flow isn't great. So that data is probably not relevant to them. But if you were like, yeah, I was a hand raiser, didn't know much about Splash, and now I do know a lot about Splash or Cvent, whatever it is, that's the information that they want to know. So taking
Absolutely.
what's valuable for those stakeholders and turning it kind of into what's most relevant and digestible.
Yeah.
Integrations are key. And I know we're going to unpack it a bit more in a couple minutes, but yeah, so smart. I know it's again a meaty topic, but do you have like a simple starter pack follow-up technique that really any marketer could implement? Because getting event data just in its own is like a feat itself, and then doing something with it is also a feat. And so I would love to know if you have any starter packs or tips or tricks for anyone getting started using their event data.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, again, if you're starting at literally zero, just start with the basics of reporting. Make sure that you're working with your event tech provider to understand what reporting is possible and make sure you get a handle on like what the data means. Every event tech tool is going to have their own definitions. Is it an attendee? Is it a registrant? Like what are the terms that are being used, and get comfortable with that first before you dive into things like integrations. Integrations are a big and complex lift, especially because you don't know how your other systems work. So there's a lot of players that come into the mix. I would say at minimum, though, making sure that you are at least asking the questions about like what other tools does your company have. You're probably going to have something like Salesforce or HubSpot. You're probably going to have a marketing automation tool like Marketo, whatever the case is. I would say the sales and marketing focus is probably going to be your starting point. It's probably going to be your basics. From there, you can definitely get into more advanced tools. Like if you have a budget tool, if you have a travel tool, any networking tools, like you can kind of get crazy. There really is no limit when it comes to integrations, but I would say start with the most impactful to the business, which is whether it's a sales qualified lead or a marketing qualified lead. Like that's going to get the most bang for your buck. And that's going to show the most ROI for your events right out the gate.
Yeah, I love that. That is so smart. And you want your events to show that they have an impact on the bottom line. Like that is most of the reasons why we do events, is to prove impact of them. So having that is kind of really key. Is there like a great kind of timeline? Like, do you have a ideal timeline for this data to make its maximum impact? Or like I'm asking it, and I feel like it also depends on the event type. Like with a lead gen event, you want people to action on it right now, immediately.
Right away.
So that hot lead doesn't go cold. Well, really with any event, you want to try and follow up within, I would say like 24 to 48 hours. And then you can do a drip nurture or another type of like slower follow-up, but you definitely want that personal touch as soon as possible for maximum impact. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Absolutely. And I think you need to give the attendee something to walk away with. Like, you need to give them next steps, and that should be personalized, right? If they're attending thought leadership webinar, don't just pound them with like sales collateral. Give them like a next, maybe it's a white paper they can download. Maybe it's another webinar that's relevant content. Hey, we see that you enjoyed this one. We recommend the next one. Or maybe they didn't show up to the webinar. They can watch it on demand. Like, they need to have something as next action. That's for the attendees. Then on the organization side, you need to make sure sales has those leads in their hand like the day of. We get asked, we give them 24 hours. The sales team's like, we need them before the event started, is what kind of it gets to. But I think, in all seriousness, like, the sooner they have it, the better. But I think there's also something to be said for, you want to action on it right then and there, but then you also need to give it time to let things happen. So when it comes to like the marketing story, you don't want to stop looking at the data, and you don't want to stop looking at that person. Let's look at that person 30 days from now, or 2 weeks from now, 30 days from now, 60 days. Maybe we even look 6 months and see like, wow, they actually got further down in the funnel. Can we attribute it back to this webinar? Like, what was their first touch point? I know you guys at Slush have like such big content on the event-led growth, and where is it the first touch point? Is it the most recent touch point? There's so much goodness there, and there's so much healthy debate on what is the most impactful way to look at that. But I think that's all going to come down to your organization, where you guys attribute the lead source, basically.
Oh yeah, that multi-touch attribution, we hear about it a lot. So kind of looking at, that was all just such good information to gather. Another piece of looking at the data and actioning on it, how do you look at it to drive personalization through the pipeline?
Yeah, and that's definitely where your marketing automation tool is going to come into play, because great, you attended this event, but again, like, look at that full picture. Maybe this is literally just one piece of what the person is doing. They could have downloaded some collateral 2 weeks or 2 days before. Maybe they talked to a sales rep. Maybe they had a demo. Those might even be more telling pieces of information. This is just part of that story. So I think it's a matter of making sure that this attendance data, engagement data plugs into the bigger picture. But maybe after they attend, like, they get put onto a specific campaign or into a certain drip like campaign.
Yeah.
That's focused on this content. Maybe we send them to sales because of other things that they've already done. And this is just the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But it should be all part of that larger buyer journey. This is just one piece of it. This is just an action that they're taking. It's an important one for sure, but it's part of that bigger story.
Oh yeah, totally. And just one of my favorite exercises to do is like, you sit and look at a buyer's journey, and when you're mapping out your events, like, what are the touch points you want them to go through? Because there's, I think, 27 throughout a buyer's journey of all of their different touch points before making a purchase. So like, map out those different touch points. And then obviously when you create an event, be like, okay, if someone attends this event, what's another thing that I could give them throughout their journey as a buyer?
Absolutely.
And it can be evergreen content and super scalable content that you probably have existing somewhere, and you can just repackage and repurpose it, especially your on-demand webinar and on-demand content. You can turn it into blogs and like
Sound
mini
bites,
courses, sound bites, so many other ways to repurpose it and continue that like personalization based on people's interest throughout the journey, which is great. And now we've talked a lot about integrations, and we've kind of tiptoed around it. And I think it's time that we dive a bit into it. Buckle up, everybody. So we're going to get into a bit of the technical side of the house. So as we mentioned, event data that lives in isolation or in a spreadsheet alone is going unused, and it's not being actioned on. Taylor, what is your like must-have integrations in an event tech stack to make sure that your data is able to flow from one place to another seamlessly?
Yeah, I would say definitely you're going to want to mostly be looking at your sales and marketing tools. Get with those teams out the gate, like, be at the table. The reality is that your event tech tool or provider is part of your marketing tech stack. We're seeing a big shift in that. Event tech used to kind of be its own awkward section or category, but really it is part of your marketing tech stack. So make sure that you are in those meetings. And if you don't know who those people are, find out. Don't be afraid to be the pioneer of that. But find out from them, like, hey, what are the fields that you guys would need for us to be able to pass information over. At minimum, it's going to be things like first name, last name, email. Maybe you need country from a consent standpoint to find out what kind of regulations they have. Maybe you need their mobile number, whatever it is, that's going to be dependent on your guys' organization's requirements and setups in those tools, but find out what those fields are at minimum. And then from there, it's like session attended or session no-show. Those are kind of some standard fields that might get passed over to Marketo. Maybe it's product interest that gets passed over for a sales lead. Those are the kind of basics. But when you're talking about integrations, most people, most admins for those tools, they will know what you're talking about. It's basically the mappable fields or the integration points. Those are kind of the keywords you could use.
Yeah. And then kind of just double tapping, how do you look at prioritizing what information gets passed from one system to another? And I know that that is like something you would want to talk to with your admin and mapping all of those fields, but how do you kind of think about prioritizing the data pass through?
Yeah, good question. And I feel like that does go back up to the goals. You probably don't need to pass your entire reg form over to sales. Sales doesn't need to know that the person has a dietary restriction. Like you can kind of go through. That's why the reality is you think building out a reg form shouldn't need 10 people in the room, but sometimes it does. And that is okay. Less people is more always. But like if you need to have a lead management person at the table, you need to have your event design team or your event planner, you need to have your admin. Like it's okay to have those people in the room, especially as you are building out this framework and architecture. Like it's okay to have people in the room. Don't assume. That happens way too many times that people assume it'll be good. We'll figure out the integration later. Well, you actually didn't ask for country, and that's a requirement to get into Marketo. So now you literally can't pass that information. So you have to add that into the reg form and it's too late. Like don't make assumptions. So I would say, form a committee. If there isn't a committee already, form one. It's completely okay. Be the voice there. Like I said, any tool can be integrated. It's just a matter of making sure that you like start small, start with the ones that are the most impactful for the organization. And then you can kind of go from there.
This conversation has just flown by and you've dropped so many incredible nuggets.
Good.
So good. I want to touch a little bit on proving value to stakeholders. So I kind of want to talk through, we've chatted through strategy, we've chatted through technical implementation of integrations and mapping fields back. We've talked about goals. The biggest part of showing that your event actually worked and the data you got is valuable is being able to communicate that to your stakeholders. And what kind of metrics have you found is most effective in kind of moving the needle with your leadership teams and proving the success from your event programs and how they really are such a unlocker for your events and your event success?
It depends on your leaders. For us, Cvent leaders love data. They're like, what are the numbers? And it's like, if you don't have numbers, see ya. So I think for us, it's just having that, the actual data, whether it's visual, whether it's like a spreadsheet format, that's fine, however they want to see it. But compared to like anecdotal feedback, that kind of doesn't really do much. One thing that also proves really compelling is year over year data or program over program. If you don't have a whole year life cycle, that's fine. Let's say, for example, like you decided to shorten your webinar length. You want to be able to see, okay, what happened because of that? So marking those like touch points on a chart. Let's say you see engagement spiked and then you're like, oh, that's right around the time that we shortened our webinar program. We saw engagement spike. That's a really compelling data point. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe you are seeing that your conference dates are 4 days long and the last day of the conference, you're getting like dismal engagement. You're seeing no shows, etc. That becomes something that you can bring directly to stakeholders and say, look, we're spending this amount of money on this day and you're getting literally not much bang for your buck on that. Money kind of speaks in that sense, and numbers are money. For us, that's definitely something that helps.
Yeah. And I think being able to like story tell that data in a compelling way is also huge. So you're saying like, we noticed an uptick of 25% engagement when we shortened our webinar program, like kind of shows like, oh, I'm making an impact because I'm telling this story and I have data interwoven in between to prove that it's true, which I love. And I could not agree more. The data matters and data-backed decisions. Like it's just, you hear it everywhere. You got to have proof in the pudding. So we've got just a couple more minutes, and I'd love to pick your brain quickly while we still have you here, Taylor. Is there another way or more innovative way to capture data than the old way of surveys? I think we touched a little bit on it, but interweaving it within your content is a great way to capture data. But I would love if you have any thoughts there, Taylor.
Yeah, I think the reality is people are different and people share things in different ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think providing multiple ways for people to provide feedback is great. So yeah, weaving it throughout the program itself. If it's a webinar, capture those reactions. You can literally look back and see how many positive reactions there were, the little emojis. Were there any negatives? Like, did people react negatively to some of the content? Did people literally drop off of the webinar at a certain point when maybe you shifted conversation and it wasn't a hit? So I think there's some contextual that you could take away. Like, you can make some assumptions off of that. Feedback survey is classic. You're always going to get, that's just like the baseline. You can also empower your sales reps or whoever's going to be doing the follow-up to ask for feedback too. Have them talk to their customers. There's nothing wrong with anecdotal feedback, but that shouldn't be the source of your data. Like, you shouldn't just be like, well, this one sales rep said. We've all had that happen. So it should be kind of a mix of contextual, literal feedback, and then I would say anecdotal.
Yeah, I love that. And Taylor, thank you so much for all of your insights today. I mean, we truly covered such a tremendous amount of ground, from like strategic approaches to data collection to demonstrating ROI. So I just have one last question for you. What is one piece of advice that you want to leave our audience with today?
I think I alluded to it earlier. Like, don't make assumptions. I think people are very afraid of being the one to ask why in a room. Since I was like 3 years old, I was always the why kid. But just be that person. Why are we collecting this? What are we doing with it? Is there a better way we could be doing it? So yeah, don't make assumptions that someone's already taking care of it. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but you will quickly become very invaluable. And don't be surprised when you become like bombarded and you become the expert. But I think it's a great thing, and it's a great way to kind of elevate yourself and then elevate your events program and then elevate your organization. So don't be afraid to be the one asking those questions in the room. Don't make assumptions. We all know what that does, right?
Yeah, when you assume things, is just such good advice. And again, Taylor, thank you so much. And on behalf of the entire Splash team, thank you so much for joining us today. And until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening to Checked In. To get connected and learn more, visit splashthat.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.